The Boy and the Heron was easily one of my most anticipated films of the year. Hayao Miyazaki is a true legend among legends, having directed not just some of the greatest animated movies of all time, but some of the greatest movies full stop. His previous and supposedly final movie, The Wind Rises, was an outstanding film on all accounts, combining rich historical and character drama with the director's dreamlike wonder. So, 10 years after that, Miyazaki has come out of retirement for a third time. Yes, he didn't even succeed at his third attempt, with a film that was billed as one of his most mature works. With expectations this high, it's easy to be disappointed, but here I really was disappointed. This is the director's weakest film by a far distance, and I left the cinema feeling cold and underwhelmed. It really isn't all bad, however. The animation is, as expected, properly stunning stuff. It's not just the colour and visual wonder of the world, but also the motion of it all. The interactions between the film's characters, the natural world, and objects within it has such a beautiful fluidity to it. I shouldn't be blown away by the mere sight of someone opening a door, but it was done with such artistry. Truly, this is the reason to go and see this film, and see it in the cinema. On a pure aesthetic level, this sits up there with the director's other work. It's quintessential Miyazaki. Similarly, the film's score by longtime collaborator Joe Hisaishi is one of my favourites of the year. Equal parts powerful, delicate and emotional, it does unfortunately do a lot of the heavy lifting for the film, but nevertheless it exquisitely complements the visual and adds to the beauty of the film as an audiovisual experience. All of this combined means that the film really does look and sound like any other Miyazaki movie, and it even somewhat feels like one too. But unfortunately, The Boy and the Heron lacks the emotional and thematic depth of all of the director's previous films, and this is why I was ultimately left so dissatisfied with it. The characters, relationships and story are all very forgettable in this. Our protagonist, Mahito, whose name I just had to Google because I couldn't remember it even though they shout it in the film constantly, is dull as dishwater. During the film's outstanding opening scene, you think, oh, he's gonna be this plucky kid, perhaps even akin to Ivan in Ivan's childhood. But for the rest of the film, he comes across as more of a blank slate than anything else. You could make the argument that this is due to grief, but if this was what was intended, that this change is because of post-traumatic stress, then it was not properly explored or communicated. Similarly, his relationship with the Heron, who in my opinion sounds way too much like Ryuk from Death Note to the extent where I thought it could have been the same voice actor, was just a big nothing. It's not only cliched, but also poorly done for what's a pretty standard narrative arc, and by the end of their journey together, the film was telling us what their relationship had become rather than having shown it naturally over the course of the second and third act. As I mentioned before, this is primarily a film about grief. Miyazaki is a master storyteller, and usually packs so much subtlety, commentary, both political and social, and depth into his work. But unfortunately, this is another area where The Boy and the Heron pales in comparison to the rest of the director's great work. Grief is explored only on a surface level, in a way that many dime a dozen family films have done before. If you want to see a film from a child's perspective that does the same thing but better, then check out Danny Boyle's Millions. It's been a hot minute since I've seen it, but I remember it being rather good. Or actually, A Monster Calls, which is an English language film from the same director as El Orfanato. That one will really rip your heart out. Heron's exploration of grief really does pale in comparison to these films, while also the many themes that feel thrown in during the film's third act are presented in far too esoteric a fashion to be impactful, and this is coming from an Evangelion fan. During the movie's climax, I felt absolutely nothing, and this was quite possibly the collective consequence of these themes, characters, and relationships not working. In addition to that, however, the visual splendor of the world is also somewhat dampened by the fact that, generally speaking, it is not very well realized. And again, this is very unlike Miyazaki's usual fare. While much of the world functions as obvious metaphor, it ultimately feels incredibly random. Every new area we visit feels disjointed from the previous bit. And when the film gets to its magical adventure, which is when I began to realize that the film was losing me, it starts to feel like a parade of cute and cool ideas that have been stitched together before its purpose was properly figured out. Compare this to any other of Miyazaki's fantasy worlds, particularly those of Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, and you'll realize just how lacking The Boy and the Heron is. In those, we are learning something new with every corner we turn, but here we're just confronted with something new that doesn't tell us anything substantive about the world or anything meaningful about the protagonist and his struggles. There's no world building here, only world showing, and this is why I'm pretty confident that this film is going to be largely forgotten about by Ghibli fans, turning it into one of the few films directed by this all-time great that doesn't stand alone in the popular culture. It pains me to say that this is Miyazaki's worst film, and that it is for this that he came out of retirement, instead of choosing to end on one of his better works. If you're a Ghibli fan, then you know what, this isn't terrible by any means, and if you can catch it on a very big screen, you'll enjoy it on a sensory level. But as it stands though, this was a huge letdown. I can't imagine ever going back to this one really, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. So what did you think of The Boy and the Heron? Do you agree with me, or is this just another hot take? As always, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider tipping me on Ko-Fi. The link is in the description, and also in the description is the link to my podcast, the Extreme Cinema Podcast, the most recent episode of which is an epic two-parter discussing the filmography of David Lynch, my all-time favourite director. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.